Well, thanks very much for inviting me here tonight. I'm delighted to be here, and I've brought some things with me that I'm sure you might like to look at, some of you. And I just discovered something that's incredible to me. My mother was a teacher and my father was a teacher. They were both teachers, and when my father died, somebody, a member of the family, gave us a diary from the first place he taught. He was up there for a year, and up in the Rainy River district. And he taught 42 children in one schoolhouse, and we have a picture of that. And none of us has been able to figure out who Winona was. There was a Winona kept on coming up in this diary. Went to see Winona on a Sunday afternoon, and Winona and I had a picnic and such and such. Anyway, no one knows who Winona is. And while I was going through my books at home about botany and nature study in the early 1900s, I found a nature study, the Ontario Teacher's Manual for Nature Study, and the date is later, it's 1922. And Winona's name is in it. So I just discovered that today, and there is her last name. So maybe we can track her down. Yeah, she was probably born in 1909 as well, as my father. Anyway, the chap that I wanted to talk about tonight was my grandfather, Allan Cameron. I'm named after him. Allan Cameron was born in 1870. His family, is that right? Yeah, 1870. And his family was fairly wealthy, wealthy farmers in Whitby. And they went to church at the small Presbyterian or Anglican Church, St. John's Anglican Church, right? You can see it from the Highway 401 at Whitby. And he pumped the organ there as a child. And the gravestone for Allan Cameron, his father, is the biggest stone in the cemetery. So I know they were rich, and they owned the hotel in Whitby. They owned the family owned 4 schooners and delivered lemons, linen, one other thing that I can't remember, and liquor. From they imported it up the Erie Canal, and then their schooner brought it across to Whitby, which is almost due north from the Erie Canal, and they sold it all along the north shore of Lake Ontario. And in 1850, in 1 week, they made $5,000. And we have the book with the writing in it, and they made $5,000, which my brother, who's a much better historian than I'll ever be, says it was getting close to $1 million in today's dollars. So that was their gross sales of liquor, lemons, and linen. Anyway, my grandfather, Allan Cameron, didn't want to have anything to do with that family, so he became a teacher. He went to normal school in Brooklyn, and learned how to be a teacher when he was 17. And then he came to, which almost gives me roots in this community, he taught in 1897 in Mono Center. And then he moved to Schaumburg in 1800. So he taught the Schaumburg School in 1800. He taught there for a number of years, and then he moved to Welland. So he didn't, although he was great pals with the people who remained in Whitby, he didn't have that much to do with the liquor business. So I felt that I should explain that. What I wanted to do tonight was, and I've got a couple of books that my grandfather left me on teaching botany from the early 1900s. I haven't got anything from well, I've got one in 1906, so that's pretty close to the... Anyway, my grandfather would have taken a hike, maybe a couple weeks later. he would have taken a hike of the 31 children he had at the Mono Center. He would have taken them out to the, right behind the school, and they would have looked for spring wildflowers, which was on the curriculum. Yeah, you had to do it if you, and it suggests that when you've got 31 or 42 children, the older children would help the younger children. And the interesting thing about it, as far as I'm concerned, is how advanced they were in their thinking back then about what's good education and what isn't. Because not only did they identify the plant, but they wrote poems about the plant, they drew pictures of the plant, and they did little skits about the plants, and it was just, it was a very multiple intelligence type of education back then, I thought. Of course now, you don't have to learn the names of spring wildflowers. And I think we're worse for it because I think it's a great resource. And because I'm a botanist, I'm biased, but I think probably one of the nicest things we have around here is our spring wildflowers. I can hardly wait for them to come up. This one, the hepatica, is on the bottom right, is just about up. If you dig through the leaves, it's the flowers are there. It hasn't appeared yet, but if you know where to look, you can find some. So it's almost here. And here's a book that my grandfather left me about, and this one is Page and Company 1916, and hepatica, it says, tells you how many flowers it has and tells you some botanical stuff, and then it goes into a poem. Blue as the heaven it gazes at, startling the loiterer in the naked groves with unexpected beauty. For the time of blossoms and green leaves is yet afar. And I guess I didn't bring John Burroughs' book. John Burroughs, of course, is a famous naturalist in New York State. He says about the hepatica, there's nothing fairer, if as fair as the first flower out, the hepatica. I find I've never admired this little firstling half enough. When at the maturity of his charms, it is certainly the gem of the woods. So there you have it. That's how we used to speak of flowers. Now, in biology class, you talk more about the genomes and the DNA and all that kind of stuff, which is, I think, okay, but too bad. Anyway, I'm sorry that my wife Leslie couldn't be here tonight because she gave me this picture 3 or 4 Christmases ago, and it's got 9 of my favorite spring wildflowers. And what I'd like to do is kind of take you for, we go back to the turn of the century, and you can pretend that we're in a one-story, one-room schoolhouse, and we've just gone out the back door, and there's a little woods, and if we didn't have a woods, we would have a hedgerow, and we'll go out and see as many wildflowers as we can see. So that's what I intend to do tonight. I hope that's okay. All right. Okay. All right. Now, these pictures are small, and I'm hoping that I'm trusting that you will probably remember some of the plants, or maybe all of them. And but certainly, I'd invite you up here to have a closer look later, because I'm going to point to some things that you won't be able to see from the back. The first flower is blue cohosh. And I was terribly excited when my daughters moved to Virgil down in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and of course I love that little pharmacy there. And I was terribly excited to find a box on the shelf of blue cohosh powder. So I know that it's been a medicine, and someone's run off with my notes. Oh, I see them.
Oh, I tuned it. I thought
they're awfully good, aren't they? Here, June, you come up here.
Once in a while, too. I thought they were handouts.
just wanted to say that because my daughter-in-law had a baby today, I wanted to mention that blue cohosh was something that the native people used during childbirth to take away some of the pains of childbirth. And I mentioned that to her today, and she said, "Now you tell me." But anyway, it's a plant about this high, and the name caulophyllum means leaf, leaf on the phyllum means leaf, and caulo means stem. So the leaf is actually on the stem, this same stem where the flower appears. And the flower is a little leathery thing that you really have to be looking for, or you'll never see it. As a matter of fact, the whole plant, if you're not looking for it, you won't find it. Because by the time it comes up out of the ground blue, purpley blue, and then by the time you've gone home and made sure your camera works and gone back tomorrow or the day after, it's turned green and you can't find it anymore. It looks like metal rue, which is another wildflower that I'm not going to talk about today, but the Latin name, Caulophyllum thalictroides. Thalictroides means it looks like a metal rue. So if you know what a metal rue looks like, then you have half a chance. But anyway, that's a blue cohosh, and that'll be up in a week or two. And the next one is violet, which is just about everybody's favorite because it's so recognizable. And I live right across from the Welsh Tract, the Simcoe County Forest, and I'm there. Leslie and I are there almost every day. The days that we're not there, we're over at Neil Waters' farm looking at his woods. So we're out every day looking at these things. And I know we have about 5, maybe 6 violets. There's 3 or 4, there's 3 blue ones, all different heights. And there's a yellow one and there's a white one growing in the woods over there. Now, the thing that is interesting to me, and excuse me, I'm going to tell you some stories that my grandfather would never have told his grade 6 students. Okay? I'm going to tell you this bit because I just can't help myself. Violet comes from a Greek word, I-O. It's spelled I-O, and violet contains that in the middle somewhere. And there's a story about I-O, which is, I think, more memorable than the biology of the plant, so I'm going to share it with you. The god we're talking about here in Greek legends is Zeus, and his girlfriend, his wife's name is Hera, and she's the goddess of motherhood and childbirth. And but his girlfriend's name was Io. She was a beautiful, beautiful nymph, and they were off together in a meadow, out of sight from everybody. And if you've read Greek myths, you know that this is a common element. They're off together, and they see over the horizon dust as Hera comes marching across the horizon, mad as a hatter at what she spotted on the other side of the meadow. And Zeus knows that it's too late to escape, so he quickly, like that, turns Io into a heifer. A white heifer. And he thinks that'll be good enough. That then when Hera catches him, he says, "Oh, I was just out for a walk," and Zeus says, "What's that?" And she says, "Oh, it's just a cow over there, young heifer." Anyway, it doesn't fool Hera one little bit. And this is a cautionary tale to all men. Hera snaps her fingers and chases Io with flies, stinging flies. And that's right, if you're interested, that's why cattle are bothered by flies to this day. And the flies stung her and stung her and stung her, and she wept so much, those big cow eyes. And everywhere she wept, up sprung a violet. This cow went right to the edge of the sea to get away from the flies. She jumped in the sea and swam across a great channel, which to this day is called the Bosphorus. Bos means cow, and this is where the cow crossed. So there's the Bosphorus is a story about violets as well. Shakespeare made it famous too by relating the legend of you drop violet drops in somebody's eyes when they're asleep, and when they open their eyes, they fall madly and uncontrollably in love with the first living thing they see. In the Midnight Summer's Dream, the eye drops are dropped in the eyes, and when she wakes up, the first thing she sees is an ass. So she falls in love with the ass, or a donkey. So that's another cautionary tale, I guess. The next plant is about this high, and the interesting thing about this plant, which is called, it has a number of names. The interesting thing is it has about 1,000 leaves that come up singly to every flower, because it's one of those lily plants. It's a lily. It's one of those lily plants that grows kind of a bulb, and the bulb takes so long to produce enough energy to produce a flower. They say 7 years. The same with trilliums. They say it takes 7 years for a flower for the plant to store up enough energy reserves to actually flower. So that's why there's thousands of leaves to every one flower. You can tell which plant is going to have a flower, because instead of one leaf sticking up, there's two. Now, when I was working for the Conservation Authority, we had a staff outing. I don't know if you remember, Peter. We went on a staff outing to a new park at Bronte Creek, and there was a young lady there who somebody asked her. There was about 13 or 14 of us there. We were all professional naturalists. We had, at that stage at the Conservation Authority, we had more professional naturalists working for us than the province of Ontario. We were just, it was very rich. It was a very rich time to be working for the authority. Anyway, we went to this little nature center at Bronte Creek, and the young lady hadn't been told who we were. We were just members of the public, she thought. And so she was showing us some slides of spring wildflowers. She showed us this one, and she says, "Can anybody tell me what this one is?" And we heard dogtooth violet, we heard fawn lily, we heard trout lily, we heard adder's tongue, and some smart aleck at the back said Erythronium americanum. So for the rest of the slideshow, she just went like this. One thing that I've learned about, I like the name. We always used to call it dogtooth violet, but it's not a violet, so I should really call it a lily. So I like to call it trout lily. And it has leaves that are a little bit speckled and shaped like a trout, so that makes sense to me. So, but I know my dad always called it adder's tongue. But anyway, it's trout lily, and the interesting thing about trout lily for me is that bees don't use it until the afternoon. And the reason they don't use it till the afternoon is another plant that I'm going to be talking about in a minute, is spring beauty, and the bees prefer it. And then when it closes up and there's nothing for the bees to eat, then they go there. But otherwise they leave it alone, which is no great hardship for the trout lily, because it self-pollinates anyway. So at least it can. All right, now the next one. The first three are all Canadian. They're all Canadian plants. The next one, this one, came from Europe with the pioneers, in with their seeds. And it already had a tremendous reputation in Europe as a cough medicine. And it was called cough dispeller, actually. The Latin name is Tussilago. Tussilago means cough dispeller. And the guy who named it, Carl Linnaeus, who designed the way we name plants and animals to this day with the binomial system where you name everything with two names, Two Latin names. One of his rules was you should never use, the name of the plant should always be a form. It should always be the form of the plant, not the function of the plant. Function is so whimsical, really, that you don't know that it's always going to be used for such and such, so you don't name it that. And so he made that rule. You had to name the plant after its form. But he broke his own rule when he named this plant, because he called it Tussilago cough dispeller, because everybody already knew what it was. Because in France, at that time, 250 years ago, if you ran a chemist's shop and served out medicine for people, the symbol for that was the leaf of this plant, which was like a colt's foot, the shape of a colt's foot. So it's the name most people call this is colt's foot, because Leslie didn't draw the leaf because you don't see the leaf when the flower is out, and that's why it's called sun. It's also called sun before the father. That's another name for it, because the sun is the flower and the father is the leaf. So that plant comes from Europe. I've made medicine, cough medicine from that plant. One spring, a friend and I chopped it. It has a stem that goes sideways from one plant to the other. You can cut that stem. It's smaller than my baby finger. It's a small goes across the top of the ground, and you can boil that in sugar syrup, thick sugar syrup, and then dry it on wax paper for a couple of days, and then you chop it up into 1-inch pieces. And I wish I'd brought some, because I could have given you some, because it tastes very sweet and nice. But you can't, it's just like sugar. There's not much of a taste to it. But it's a cough medicine that pioneers would have used, certainly, for coughs.
Does it work out?
No.
It just tastes good.
It tastes good. And you know, sugar makes your throat feel better. Like a lot of people take honey and ginger for sore throat.
That's right.
And it feels the same kind of way. Yes?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and it's brutal. Once you have it in your yard, you cannot get rid of it. I've got it in my yard, and it's just, it takes over. Amazing.
It looks just like, if you're driving past and you see it in a ditch, you'd swear it was dandelions. But it comes out about a month before dandelions. And if you look closely at it, the petals are much finer. And the stem is completely different. The stem reminds you of asparagus because it seems to have leaf scales on it. Whereas a dandelion stem, of course, is straight without scales. So the next plant in 1937 became the provincial flower. It was voted on by all the school children in Ontario. The runner-up, we're talking about contests, the runner-up was dandelion. Because it had to be a plant that grew everywhere in Ontario, and they both do. But the thing about Trilliums, it had to be a Canadian plant, and dandelions came from Europe. And in the early books, some of the early books that I have, it's not called a trillium. Trillium is a name that's come recently, I think. In the early books, it's called wake robin. Wake robin, yeah. And I guess somewhere it grows, I don't know where, but somewhere it grows, and it flowers when robins are just arriving back from the south. And that could be a story that comes from Europe, to tell you the truth, because they have wake robins in England as well.
But you said the trillium is not native to Canada?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
It's true, but it's a new name.
Oh.
Trillium, which means three lily. It has three of everything: 3 leaves, 3 petals, 3 sepals. Everything comes in threes. It's native to Canada, and but there are trilliums elsewhere too. But this one, grandifolium, that's about this high. It's a big one, and that's the one that's our provincial emblem. What we call wake robin today in the nature business, and it's also called stinking Benjamin, is the red trillium. The red trillium stinks because it attracts insects that eat meat. And so that's how it got the name stinking Benjamin, or another name is wet dog trillium, because it smells like a wet dog. I told that to my daughter-in-law too, because people used to make a tea from that that helped new mothers as well. So she says again, now you tell me. This is one of my absolute favorites. I love the painting too because it's got sort of a sweep to it. And that's about how it looks. And this is Spring Beauty. It's named after a botanist. My great ambition is to have a plant named after me. But it'll have to be probably a small member of some family on a remote island because pretty well all the names are taken. But anyway, this plant, Spring Beauty, is a beautiful little plant. What's more, it produces a little spud or bulb that you can eat. And if you probably shouldn't, if you go to the Courtright Center and you see, or Neil Waters Woods and you see these things growing, don't be caught with a shovel digging them up. You need quite a few to make a meal, but they're very tasty. They're like they're a little bit like water chestnuts. Very tasty. People used to call them fairy spuds because they were a little bit, you cooked them just like potatoes.
Is that native to Canada?
Yeah, I think this one's the only one. The Tussilago or coltsfoot is the only one that comes from Europe, I think. All the rest of them are native. That's not to say that some of them don't have related species growing elsewhere. Hepatica is the one that I read you the poem about earlier. It was also a medicinal plant in Europe, but this one is a Canadian one. But there is a relative that lives in Europe, and it was so named because it was used as a cure for a medicine for hepatitis. Hepar means liver. It was also called liverwort. And wort, W-O-R-T, is often used for a plant that's been used as a medicine. So liverwort, it was liver medicine plant, which isn't a very nice name, I don't think. I like hepatica better. But that's the one that's growing under the leaves right now. It's probably, I think it's going to be first this year. And I wrote a story about hepatica because I couldn't find one. Most of these plants have stories about them, but I couldn't find one on hepatica. And I wrote a story about hepatica winning a contest, really, so that it could be, because it was going to be the first plant to come up in spring. It's such a brave little plant. I think I even called it the brave little hepatica. Because the stem and the leaves are all covered with hairs, and also if it's cold at night, everything all contracts. It protects the pollen and the female parts of the plant, and also the roots underground form such a tight-knit web. They're very, very fibrous, and for that reason you can see hepatica growing in a snow bank. They'll come up right through the snow. So they are a very, very hardy little plant. The mayapple is, have I said it's my favorite plant before? Yeah. Almost everyone is my favorite plant, I have to admit it. But mayapple is, I used to be on the CBC. I was their resident naturalist at the local CBC station in South Ontario and Quebec. And I took Cy Strange, who some of you may remember, Cy Strange and Bill McNeil. I took them, I was very proud of it, mayapple jelly that I'd made myself out of the mayaples. And Cy Strange said, well, he says, it lacks authority. That was the nicest thing he could say about my jam. It wasn't very good. But I expected him to be nicer. But this plant grows in along the hedge or under some trees, and it spreads by roots, so that you often see it in a group of 100, and there'll be kind of a bunch of them all together. And the first insect you see going to them is the bumblebee. Bumblebee loves this plant, and you have to hunt for the flower. You have to actually, if you want to take a picture of the beautiful white flower that's about this big, you have to be willing to crawl in the dirt with your camera to get a picture of that flower, because it's difficult. The European, it's not a relative, but the namesake. There's been a mayapple growing in Europe forever, and it's very, very famous because it was used, and it was recently been made famous again by Harry Potter, who, I don't know if you read the Harry Potter series or saw some of the movies, but my favorite scene in all of the Harry Potter movies is is book 2, where Harry and all the other junior wizards are taken to greenhouse number 2, which is the seriously dangerous plants. That's where they were. And Professor Sprout, who I identify with, is the teacher. And mandrake look like a human being. They look human because they've got a forked root that looks like leaves, and sometimes they look as if they have shoulders. And if you pull one out of the ground, it actually puts its arms out and scratches the ground so you can't pull it out. And this happened to Harry. And if it screams, you'll go mad if you hear it. So in the Harry Potter story, they all wore earmuffs, safety ear plugs when they were dealing with mandrake. But our Canadian, actually it's called American mandrake, has a root, sometimes that's similar to the European namesake, but it's not nearly as dangerous. I've experimentally pulled them out of the ground, and they've never screamed at me. So I can assure you that they are poisonous, however, and so is the fruit that I made size strange some jams from. It is poisonous, but it's not poisonous if you prepare it the right way. You boil it and everything. The last plant is bloodroot, which of course is absolutely one of my favorite plants. Bloodroot is a poppy. It's a member of the poppy family. So like all poppies, if it comes out, and a day later, if it's a little bit windy or if it rains or anything, all the petals are gone. So you have to be quick to see bloodroot. When it first comes, it's about this high. When it first comes out of the ground, there's a bud at the end of the leaf, and the leaf grows around the bud like this to protect it. It forms kind of a cloak around the fragile leaf, and it's almost inside out. It turns the cloak is inside out as it turns around this leaf, so that it protects itself, which I think Leslie has captured here in this picture. And as soon as it's ready to flower, up it shoots past the leaves, out it spreads, and then makes itself available to insects, and then it's gone. By the time you've got your camera ready, it's pretty well gone. The interesting thing about bloodroot is that it also has a stem that goes across the top of the ground, or just under the surface of the ground, and if you scrape it with your fingernail, it bleeds red. And I always thought that this plant, more than any other plant, deserves a story. There must be a story about this plant and why it's named bloodroot. I mean, it just sounds ominous, and there should be a story about it. I couldn't find any. I'm still searching to this day for a story. So I wrote one. And but I didn't write it myself. When I was studying the power of story as a teaching tool, I think, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about this because I've done it a lot. I'm pretty sure I'm right. That if you tell somebody a story, they enjoy it, but they may not remember it for long. But if you play a game and the people make up a story themselves, they'll remember it for years. I know this is true. So what I did is I had a group of teachers and I fooled them. I said, we're going to write some stories about some of the wildflowers that I've been telling you about. We're going to write some stories about them. And I was standing right beside this plant. So I said, right now we're going to write a story about this plant. And I write the story, I play the story game like this. We come up with a list of, how much more time do I have? A couple more minutes?
Sure.
Okay.
Now.
Okay, I can't stop now. I gotta tell you how to create a story.
That's right.
Anyway, if you have a plant, which becomes the character, and you have an object, there's always some sort of object in a story, and you have a setting, and you have an event, sort of an event around the story. If you come up with those 4 words as a group, and then you force those words, the people who are writing a story for you have to use those 4 words in the story. Believe it or not, with those constraints, it becomes a lot easier to create the story. If I asked people to write a story about this plant, you couldn't. In 4 minutes, I only give you 4 minutes. So you can't write. I've done this a lot. You can't do it. Or the story is you get partway, but you don't finish. But if I tell you that it's got to be a story, there's got to be a moon in it. Here's the words they chose. These teachers. They chose moon was moonlight night was the setting, and there was a cliff in the story, and there was the object was what was the object? A lock, I think. A lock was the object, and then the character was the. They had to talk about bloodroot. So here's the story. So this was created for me by a group of teachers in 4 minutes. And I think it could win the Oscar if they made a movie of it. So, once upon a time, there was a young man and a young woman madly in love. But the love wasn't acceptable to the girl's parents. As a matter of fact, this boy was so unacceptable and that they locked her up in a room. And somehow or other he got a message to her that on the next full moon, you have to get out of that room, and you have to come and we have to meet at our secret place in the forest, which is right beside the cliff, in a clearing in the forest. So the next full moon. So during that time, she scrapes away at the lock until she can get the door open. And she doesn't open it until there's a full moon. And the night of the full moon, right at midnight, he rushes to the secret meeting place, and her father, though, is suspicious. So he puts another lock on the door. He's suspicious that she's going to try something untoward tonight. So, to make a long story short, the story's in the book, by the way, but to make a long story short, he gets to the meeting place before she does. It's a full moon. He's in the clearing in the forest. He's waiting for his love, and she doesn't show up on time. So he starts to weep. And tears, while he's weeping, tears affect his sight. And he stumbles over the edge of the cliff, tumbling down a long, long way, bruised and bleeding, and he's at the bottom of the cliff, just lying there. She manages to get away. Late, but she manages to get away. She rushes to the clearing. He's not there. He's not there. But she looks at the edge of the cliff and she sees that bushes have been damaged. And she looks down and there's bushes. She says, oh no, what's happened? So she climbs down the cliff and she finds her loved one there dying. So she puts his head in her lap and she comforts him. And she weeps, and he bleeds, and it's a very, very sad story. And just at the same instant, they die. But they are miraculously transformed into the bloodroot plant. And if you look at the bloodroot, you can see traces of his blood to this day. And if you look at the white petals with these little white lines in them, you can see traces of her tears. And that's why the bloodroot flowers after the full moon, the first full moon of spring. So with that, I thank you. You've been a great audience and very participating, and I hope that you all get a chance over the next 2 months to get outside on a beautiful afternoon and find some of these. I can tell you that they all grow right across the street from me in the Welsh tract. So that they're all there, every single one of them. So, thank you very much.